The fluorescent lights of Terminal C hummed with an almost mechanical indifference, casting pale shadows across the polished floor. It was 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening, and Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport buzzed with the restless energy of 1,000 departures. Gate 23 stood at the far end of the corridor, a narrow bottleneck where dreams of homecomings and reunions pressed against the cold reality of procedure and protocol. Maria Jenkins stood in line, her carry-on bag resting against her worn sneakers. She was 43, though her eyes carried the weight of more years spent cleaning hotel rooms, raising 2 boys on her own, and saving every spare dollar for moments like this. Her mother was dying, stage 4. The hospice nurse had called that morning, voice soft but urgent. "If you want to say goodbye, you need to come now." Maria had emptied her savings account. She'd called in every favor. She'd packed a single bag and driven through rush-hour traffic with trembling hands. The ticket had cost more than she wanted to think about, a last-minute fare that punched a hole through her grocery budget for the next 2 months. But none of that mattered. She just needed to get on that plane. Ahead of her, the boarding agent scanned tickets with rhythmic efficiency. Beep, next, beep, next. The sound was almost hypnotic, a countdown to the moment she could finally exhale. Behind her, a man in a business suit tapped his phone impatiently. A child whined about a forgotten toy. The intercom crackled. "Final boarding call for Flight 1247 to Atlanta. All remaining passengers, please proceed to Gate 23. That was her flight. Maria stepped forward, fumbling for her phone. Her boarding pass glowed on the screen. Seat 32B, a middle seat she'd gladly endure if it meant 6 more hours with her mother. She handed the phone to the agent, a young woman with neat braids and a practiced smile. Beep. The smile faltered. "Ma'am, can you step to the side, please?" Maria's heart skipped. Is something wrong? "Just step aside. Someone will be with you in a moment." The line behind her shifted. The businessman huffed. Maria moved to the side, clutching her bag, her pulse beginning to race. She watched as other passengers streamed past, families, couples, solo travelers with expensive headphones. They all boarded without issue. She checked her phone again. The boarding pass was still there. Her name, her seat, her flight. Then she saw him. Officer Derek Thorne emerged from a side door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." He was tall, mid-30s, with the kind of rigid posture that came from years of enforcing rules without question. His uniform was TSA blue, crisp and impeccable, and his expression was carved from stone. He carried a tablet in one hand, and a radio clipped to his shoulder crackled intermittently with coded chatter. He walked directly toward Maria. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I don't understand, my flight." "Your flight is boarding, I'm aware." His tone was clipped, official. "But there's been a flag on your boarding pass. We need to conduct a secondary screening." "A flag? What kind of flag?" "I'll explain inside, this way." He gestured toward a narrow hallway branching off from the gate area. Maria glanced back at Gate 23. The agent was still scanning tickets. The line was thinning. Her window was closing. "Please," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "My mother, she's in hospice. I have to get on that plane." Officer Thorne's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, if you don't comply, you'll miss your flight entirely. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." The words hit her like a slap. She felt the eyes of other passengers on her, curious, judgmental, relieved it wasn't them. Her hands trembled as she gripped the handle of her bag. She had no choice. Maria followed him down the hallway, away from the gate, away from the plane, away from the ticking clock that was her mother's heartbeat. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the distance, an announcement echoed, "Final boarding call." And in that moment, Maria Jenkins understood what it meant to be powerless. The hallway was colder than the main terminal and quieter. Maria's sneakers squeaked against the linoleum as she followed Officer Thorne through a series of unmarked doors. Her breath came shallow and quick. She glanced at her phone, 6:52 p.m. The flight was scheduled to depart at 7:10, 18 minutes. Officer Thorne stopped in front of a small room with a metal desk, 2 chairs, and a single flickering overhead light. A camera blinked red in the corner. He gestured for her to sit. "Put your bag on the desk." Maria did as she was told, lowering the worn canvas bag onto the cold metal surface. Her hands were shaking now, and she hated that he could see it. She sat down, pressing her palms flat against her thighs to steady herself. Officer Thorne remained standing. He tapped his tablet a few times, his face illuminated by the pale blue glow. Then he looked at her, not unkindly, but not warmly either. It was the look of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "Your boarding pass was flagged during the automated security scan," he said. "There's a notation on your reservation indicating irregular purchasing behavior." "Irregular?" Maria's voice rose slightly. "I bought a ticket. What's irregular about that?" "You purchased a one-way ticket less than 6 hours before departure. You paid with a debit card, and your travel history shows no flights in the past 3 years." He set the tablet down. "These are all indicators of potential risk." "Risk?" She almost laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. "I'm a housekeeper from Fort Worth. I'm going to see my dying mother. What risk could I possibly—" "Ma'am, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm following protocol. Now, I need to ask you a few questions, and then we'll conduct a secondary baggage inspection." Maria's chest tightened. "How long will that take?" "Depends on your cooperation." She looked at the clock on the wall. 6:54 p.m., 16 minutes. "Please," she whispered, "I can't miss this flight." Officer Thorne's jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, hesitation, maybe, or recognition, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Then let's make this quick," he said. "Open your bag." Maria unzipped the bag with trembling fingers. Inside, 2 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a small Bible her mother had given her years ago, and a photograph, faded and creased, of her and her boys at a park. That was it. Everything she needed to say goodbye. Officer Thorne pulled out each item methodically, inspecting them with gloved hands. He opened the Bible, flipped through the pages. He held the photograph up to the light. Maria watched, humiliation burning in her throat. "Where's your return ticket?" he asked. "I don't have one yet. I don't know how long I'll need to stay." "Do you have proof of your mother's condition?" The question struck her like a punch. Proof. Hospital documentation, a letter from her doctor, anything that verifies your reason for travel. Maria's voice cracked. "I didn't think I'd need to prove my mother is dying." Officer Thorne set the photograph down. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he picked up his tablet again. "Unfortunately, without documentation, I can't clear you for boarding. You'll need to—" "No," the word came out sharper than she intended. "No, please, I have the hospice nurse's number. I can call her right now. She'll tell you, please." He shook his head. "That's not sufficient." Maria's vision blurred. She thought of her mother's voice on the phone that morning, thin and tired. "I'm so glad you're coming, baby. I've been waiting." And then Officer Thorne said the words that would change everything. "There's also the matter of the fine." Maria blinked. "What fine?" "For the irregularities in your booking and the delay caused by this secondary screening. Airport security protocol allows for civil penalties in cases where passenger behavior disrupts operations." He tapped his tablet. "In this case, the fine is $7,000. The room seemed to tilt. $7,000. Maria stared at him, unable to speak, unable to breathe. And somewhere in the distance, she heard the final boarding call for Flight 1247 echo through the terminal, faint, fatting, and impossibly far away. The number hung in the air between them like a guillotine blade. $7,000. Maria's lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried to process the words to make them make sense, but they ricocheted around her skull like broken glass. $7,000. For what? For buying a ticket to see her dying mother, for not having the right paperwork, for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't, her voice was barely a whisper, I don't have that kind of money. Officer Thorne's expression remained neutral, professional. The fine is mandatory, ma'am. It's outlined in Section 49 of the Transportation Security Administration's Civil Penalty Guidelines. Failure to comply with security procedures, combined with irregular travel patterns, constitutes a violation. But I didn't do anything wrong. Her voice broke on the last word. I answered your questions. I opened my bag. I've been cooperative. The violation isn't about cooperation. It's about the disruption to airport operations. He gestured toward the door. Your flagged reservation required personnel to be diverted from their regular duties. That's a resource allocation issue. The fine covers operational costs. Maria felt something cold settle in her stomach. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She looked at the clock. 6:58 p.m. 12 minutes until departure. 12 minutes until the plane carrying her last chance to say goodbye lifted off the runway without her. I have $300 in my checking account, she said, her voice steady despite the tears building behind her eyes. That's all I have left after buying the ticket. I'm a housekeeper. I clean hotel rooms for $11 an hour. I don't have $7,000. Then you'll need to make arrangements. What kind of arrangements? Payment plans are available. You can also contest the fine through the TSA's administrative review process, but that takes 60 to 90 days. 90 days? Her mother didn't have 90 days. She might not have 90 hours. And if I can't pay? Maria asked quietly. Officer Thorne paused. For the first time, his composure seemed to crack slightly. Then you'll be barred from boarding any commercial flight until the fine is resolved. And he hesitated. There may be additional legal consequences. The words landed like stones. Maria stared at her hands, calloused, worn, the hands of someone who had worked every day of her adult life and still couldn't afford an emergency. She thought of her boys, 13 and 15, staying with a neighbor tonight. She thought of her mother, waiting in a hospice bed 3 states away, probably looking at the door every time it opened, hopping to see her daughter's face. She thought of the life she'd built from nothing, and how fragile it all was. This isn't right, she said softly. Officer Thorne set his tablet down. Ma'am, I understand this is difficult. No, you don't. She looked up at him, and for the first time there was steel in her voice. You don't understand, you can't, because if you did, you wouldn't be doing this. His jaw tightened. I'm doing my job. Your job is to keep people safe. How does taking $7,000 from a woman trying to see her dying mother keep anyone safe? The question hung between them. Outside, the intercom crackled. Flight 1247 to Atlanta, doors closing in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Maria stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to get on that plane. You can't board until the fine is addressed. Then arrest me. The words came out sharp, desperate. If I've broken a law, arrest me. But don't tell me I can't say goodbye to my mother because I don't have money. Officer Thorne's hand moved to his radio. Ma'am, you need to calm down. I am calm, and she was. Beneath the fear and desperation there was a strange clarity. I'm just asking you to see me, not as a flag on your screen, not as a security risk, as a person, as someone's daughter. For a moment something shifted in his eyes. Maria saw it, a flicker of doubt, of recognition. But then his training reasserted itself. His expression hardened. I'm sorry, he said, and there was almost sincerity in his tone. But the rules are clear. No payment, no clearance. Maria felt the fight drain out of her. She sank back into the chair, her bag still open on the desk, her life laid out for inspection. $7,000. It might as well have been 7 million. The clock read 7:02 p.m. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed. It rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. Sunrise Hospice, this is Nurse Rachel. Rachel, it's Maria Jenkins. Her voice cracked. I'm not going to make it. I'm at the airport, but they won't let me board. There was a pause, then gently, I'll tell her you tried, Maria. She knows you love her. Can you put the phone to her ear, please? Of course, honey, hold on. There was rustling, the sound of footsteps, a door opening. Then Rachel's voice, softer now distant. Mrs. Jenkins, it's your daughter. Maria pressed the phone to her ear, tears streaming silently down her face. She could hear her mother's breathing, shallow, labored, each breath a battle. Mama, it's me. I'm so sorry. I tried so hard to get there. A sound came through the line. Not words, her mother was too weak for words now, but a sound, a breath that might have been meant as comfort, as forgiveness, as love. I love you, Mama. I love you so much. Another breath, softer now. And then silence. Not the silence of death, not yet, but the silence of distance, of a goodbye that would never feel complete. Maria lowered the phone. Her hand was steady. Her tears had stopped. She looked at Officer Thorne, who had stood motionless throughout the call, his face carefully blank. You should know, she said quietly, that you just cost me the last conversation I'll ever have with my mother. I hope that fits somewhere in your protocol. The clock read 7:07 p.m. 3 minutes until departure. And Maria Jenkins sat in a cold room, surrounded by the pieces of her life, while somewhere above her, a plane prepared for takeoff without her aboard. Officer Thorne turned away, his shoulders rigid. He keyed his radio. Control, this is Thorne at Secondary Screening Room 4. Subject is non-compliant with civil penalty payment, requesting supervisor guidance. The radio crackled. A woman's voice responded, copy that, supervisor en route, maintain position. He unclipped the radio and set it on the desk. For several seconds he didn't move. Maria watched him, this man who held her fate in his hands, this stranger who had reduced her life to a line item on a tablet screen. She wondered what kind of person could do this work, day after day, and still sleep at night. Then he spoke, his voice quieter than before. You should contact a family member, someone who might be able to help with the payment. Maria almost laughed. My family is a hospice room in Atlanta and 2 teenage boys eating cereal for dinner in Fort Worth. There's no one else. Friends and employer. I clean hotel rooms, officer. My coworkers are in the same boat I am. And my friends, she shook her head. The people in my life don't have $7,000 lying around. He turned back to face her. For the first time, she saw something in his expression that might have been discomfort. Credit card, loan. Maxed out paying for my son's asthma medication last year, and no bank is going to give a loan to someone like me. Someone like you. Poor, the word came out flat, matter of fact. That's what you meant when you said irregular travel patterns, isn't it? You meant I'm the wrong kind of person to be buying last-minute plane tickets, too poor to be trusted. Officer Thorne's jaw worked. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Maria stood again, slower this time, exhausted. Let me tell you what my day has been like, officer. I woke up at 4:30 this morning to work the breakfast shift at the Marriott on Airport Boulevard. I cleaned 19 rooms before noon. Stripped beds, scrubbed toilets, wiped down surfaces that people like you probably don't even think about. She took a breath, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. At 12:15, I got the call about my mother. By 12:30, I was at the bank, withdrawing everything I had. By 1 o'clock, I'd bought the ticket. Yes, last minute, yes, one way, because that's all I could afford. I drove through traffic, parked in long-term because it's cheaper, and ran through this airport with my heart in my throat because I thought if I could just get on that plane, I could hold my mother's hand one more time." Officer Thorne said nothing. "And now I'm here," Maria continued, "in this room being told I owe $7,000 for the privilege of being poor in an airport. So no, officer, I can't just call someone. I can't just put it on a credit card. I can't make it better with money I don't have." The fluorescent light flickered above them. Somewhere in the terminal, a child laughed. The sounds of normal life, of people whose worlds weren't collapsing, filtered through the thin walls. Officer Thorne picked up his tablet, stared at it for a moment, then set it back down. "I didn't write these rules. But you enforce them. If I don't, someone else will. That doesn't make it right." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Maria saw something crack in his carefully maintained facade. Doubt, maybe, or shame, she couldn't tell which. "You're right," he said quietly. "It doesn't." Before she could respond, the door opened. A woman in her 50s entered, her uniform bearing the insignia of a senior TSA supervisor. She carried herself with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to making quick decisions. "Officer Thorne's status." He straightened immediately. "Supervisor Chen, subject was flagged for irregular travel patterns. Secondary screening revealed no prohibited items, but civil penalty protocols were triggered. Subject is unable to pay the $7,000 fine." Supervisor Chen glanced at Maria, then at the open bag on the desk. Her expression was unreadable. "Has she been informed of her options?" "Yes, ma'am. Payment plan, or administrative review." "And she says she can't pay." Chen pulled out her own tablet, tapped through several screens. Maria watched her, feeling like an exhibit in a museum, something to be examined, cataloged, and filed away. "Mrs. Jenkins," Chen said, not looking up, "I see you have no prior security incidents, no criminal record, no travel violations. This is your first flag." "Yes, ma'am." "And the purpose of your travel is to visit a family member in medical distress." "My mother, she's dying." Chen's fingers paused on the screen, just for a second. Then she continued, "Without documentation, I can't waive the penalty. TSA regulations are clear on this point. However," she looked up, "I can authorize a provisional boarding clearance if you agree to submit documentation within 72 hours and set up a payment plan for the fine." Maria felt a surge of hope. "I can board." "If you agree to the terms." Yes, of course I agree too. "But understand, Mrs. Jenkins, if you fail to provide documentation or miss a payment, a warrant will be issued for your arrest. This isn't a small matter. The fine will accrue interest at 18% annually. Over time, 7,000 becomes 10, then 15. Do you understand?" The hope curdled. Maria did the math in her head. 7,000 at 18%. Even with a payment plan she'd be paying for years. Decades, maybe. The weight of it settled on her shoulders like a physical thing. But her mother was dying. "I understand," she whispered. Chen produced a tablet and stylus. "Sign here." Maria's hand shook as she reached for the stylus. This was it. Freedom at a price she couldn't afford. She thought of her boys and what this would mean for them. Fewer groceries. No new shoes when they outgrew their current ones. No savings for emergencies. But she would see her mother. The stylus hovered over the screen. And then Maria Jenkins made a decision that surprised even herself. She set the stylus down. "No," she said quietly. Both officers stared at her. "Ma'am," Chen's voice was sharp, "you're refusing." "I'm refusing," Maria said, her voice growing stronger, "to sign my life away. I'm refusing to agree that it's okay to punish people for being poor. I'm refusing to pretend this is justice." Officer Thorne stepped forward. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is your only option." "No," Maria said. My only option is to stand here in this room and tell you that what you're doing is wrong. Maybe I can't change it. Maybe I'll miss my flight and never see my mother alive again. But I won't sign that paper and pretend it's fair." The room fell silent. And in that silence, something extraordinary happened. Officer Derek Thorne reached for his radio and turned it off. Supervisor Chen's eyes narrowed. "Officer Thorne, what are you doing?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Maria, not at a security risk, not at a flagged passenger, but at a woman standing at the edge of her world with nothing left to lose except her dignity. "Ma'am," he said to Chen, his voice carefully controlled, "I'd like to request a private consultation." "This matter is closed, officer. The subject has refused." "I understand that, but I'm invoking discretionary review protocol under Section 1540.107. As the primary screening officer, I have the right to request supervisory reconsideration before final disposition." Chen's jaw tightened. It was clear this wasn't a move she'd expected. "Officer Thorne, we have procedures. And one of those procedures allows for officer discretion in cases of potential procedural error." He kept his voice level professional. "I'd like to review the case file with you, privately." For a long moment, Chen said nothing. Maria held her breath, not daring to hope, not daring to move. The clock on the wall read 7:11 p.m. Her flight had already departed. Even if they cleared her right now, it was too late. But something in Officer Thorne's eyes had changed. Chen exhaled sharply. 5 minutes, hallway, Mrs. Jenkins, remain here." They stepped outside, leaving the door slightly ajar. Maria could hear their voices, low, tense, argumentative, but couldn't make out the words. She sank back into the chair, exhausted beyond measure. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nurse Rachel: "Your mother is resting. We're keeping her comfortable. I'm so sorry, honey." Tears blurred her vision, but Maria didn't wipe them away. She was too tired, too empty. In the hallway, the voices grew sharper. "Not about what she can afford, it's about the integrity of the system. Discretion exists for a reason, and this case clearly set a precedent we can't maintain. Talked to her mother on the phone while she was dying, and you want to." A long silence. Then Chen's voice, quieter now: "If you do this, it goes in your file." "I understand. And if she doesn't follow through with documentation, then I'll take responsibility." Another pause. Maria's heart hammered in her chest. The door opened. Both officers entered, Chen's expression tight and unreadable, Thorne's carefully neutral. Chen approached the desk and picked up her tablet. "Mrs. Jenkins," she said, her voice clipped, "upon further review, Officer Thorne has identified a procedural irregularity in how your initial flag was processed. The automated system triggered a secondary screening based on incomplete data analysis." Maria blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," Officer Thorne said, meeting her eyes, "that the flag shouldn't have been issued in the first place. Your travel pattern, while unusual, doesn't actually meet the threshold for mandatory secondary screening. The civil penalty doesn't apply." Maria's breath caught. "Are you saying—" "You're clear to travel," Chen said. "However, your original flight has departed. We'll need to rebook you." "But I don't have money for another ticket." "TSA is required to provide accommodation when procedural errors result in missed flights," Thorne said quickly. "We'll arrange for you to be placed on the next available flight to Atlanta at no additional cost." Maria stared at them, unable to process the words. I can go." Chen's expression softened slightly, barely perceptible, but there. "The next flight departs at 9:35 p.m. from Gate 17. You'll have a confirmed seat." She tapped her tablet. "I'm sending the new boarding pass to your phone now." Maria's phone buzzed. She looked down at the screen, and there it was. A new boarding pass, seat 14A, flight 1893 to Atlanta. Departure 9:35 p.m. 2.5 hours from now. Still time, still a chance. I don't understand, she whispered. Why are you helping me? Officer Thorne glanced at Chen, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. Then he looked back at Maria. Because you were right, he said quietly. The rules I enforce every day, they're designed to keep people safe. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that safety isn't just about screening for threats. It's about treating people like human beings. And today, I forgot that. Chen cleared her throat. Officer Thorne will escort you to Gate 17 and ensure your process through priority boarding. Your bag has been cleared. She paused. And Mrs. Jenkins, I hope you make it in time. Maria felt tears spill down her cheeks, but this time they were different. Not tears of desperation, but of relief so profound it felt like drowning and surfacing all at once. Thank you, she managed. Thank you so much. Chen nodded once, then left the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Maria stood, her legs unsteady, and reached for her bag. Officer Thorne picked it up first, handling it gently, and gestured toward the door. Come on, he said. Let's get you to your gate. They walked through the terminal together, past the crowds and the shops and the endless stream of travelers who had no idea what had just transpired. Maria's phone buzzed again. Another text from Rachel. She's asking for you. Can we hurry? Maria asked. Officer Thorne lengthened his stride. Absolutely. They reached Gate 17 with time to spare. Thorne spoke briefly with the gate agent, who nodded and typed something into her computer. Then he turned back to Maria. You're all set, they'll board you first. Maria looked at this man who had, just 30 minutes ago, been the obstacle between her and everything she needed. Now he was the reason she still had hope. Why, she asked, why did you change your mind? Thorne was quiet for a moment. Then, my father died 3 years ago, heart attack. I was working a double shift at the airport. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. I never got to say goodbye. He met her eyes. I've thought about that every day since. What I would have given for 5 more minutes. What I would have sacrificed. I'm sorry, Maria said softly. So am I, he handed her the bag. Go, be with your mother, and Mrs. Jenkins. You don't owe the fine, that's official. But even if it wasn't, I would have paid it myself. Some things matter more than rules. Maria didn't have words. She reached out and squeezed his hand, briefly, gratefully. And then she was moving toward the boarding area, her heart full of something she couldn't quite name. Behind her, Officer Derek Thorne stood watching until she disappeared down the jetway. And for the first time in 3 years, he felt like he'd done his job right. The plane lifted off at 9:41 p.m., 6 minutes behind schedule. Maria sat in 14A, a window seat she hadn't paid for, watching the lights of Dallas shrink below her. Her carry-on was stowed overhead. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her phone was set to airplane mode, but not before she'd sent one final text to Rachel. On my way. Tell her I'm coming. The cabin was quiet, filled with the white noise of jet engines and the occasional rustle of passengers settling in for the 2-hour flight. Beside her, a businessman in 14B was already asleep, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. Across the aisle, a young couple shared earbuds, watching something on a phone. Maria closed her eyes and let herself breathe. She'd made it. Against every odd, against a system designed to grind people like her into dust, she'd made it. And it was because one man had chosen to see her humanity instead of just following protocol. The flight attendant came by with drinks. Maria asked for water, her throat still raw from tears. The attendant, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes, handed her the cup and paused. First time flying? She asked gently. No, ma'am, just a difficult day. The attendant smiled. Well, you're in the air now, that's what matters. Maria nodded, sipping the water. The woman moved on, and Maria found herself thinking about Officer Thorne, about the weight of his confession. My father died 3 years ago, and how it had taken another person's crisis to wake him up to his own unfinished grief. She thought about Supervisor Chen, whose expression had softened just enough to suggest she, too, understood something about loss and regret. And she thought about herself, about how close she'd come to signing away her future just to board a plane, about the moment she'd set down the stylus and said no, even though it might have cost her everything. That moment haunted her now, not with regret but with wonder. Where had that courage come from? She'd spent her whole life bending, accommodating, making herself smaller so others could be comfortable. But in that room, faced with an impossible choice, she'd found something she didn't know she had. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Maria unbuckled and pulled her Bible from her bag. It was her mother's, really, given to Maria when she'd left home at 19, pregnant and scared and certain she'd ruined her life. Her mother had pressed it into her hands and said, "You're stronger than you think, baby. Don't ever forget that." Maria opened to a random page. Psalm 27, her mother's favorite. The pages were worn thin from use, and in the margins her mother had written notes in her slanted handwriting. One phrase was underlined. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" Maria traced the words with her finger. When had her mother stopped fearing? When had she learned to stand firm in the face of injustice, in the face of a world that tried to make her small? Maybe she'd always known. Maybe that strength had been there all along, waiting for Maria to recognize it in herself. The plane shuddered through a patch of turbulence. The businessman beside her stirred but didn't wake. Maria closed the Bible and looked out the window at the darkness beyond. Somewhere down there, highways stretched like arteries, carrying people to destinations both chosen and unchosen. Somewhere, her boys were probably still awake, playing video games or watching TV, unaware of how close their mother had come to missing this flight. And somewhere in a hospice room in Atlanta, her mother waited. Maria pulled out her phone, even though it was still in airplane mode, and scrolled to her photos. There, a picture from last Christmas. Her mother in a wheelchair, thin but smiling, surrounded by her grandsons. Maria had visited for 2 days, the longest she could afford to be away from work. They'd played board games and eaten soup and watched old movies. Normal things, precious things. Her mother had pulled her aside that night and said, "I'm proud of you, Maria. I know life hasn't been easy, but look at those boys. Look at what you've built. You did that." Maria had cried then as she was crying now, but her mother had wiped her tears and said, "Don't cry, baby. Save your tears for when they matter." Now they mattered. The flight attendant returned, pausing by Maria's row. "Are you all right, honey?" Maria looked up, surprised. "Yes, ma'am, just thinking about my mother." "Is she waiting for you in Atlanta?" "She is." The attendant's expression softened. "Then you're right where you need to be." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small packet of tissues. "Here, just in case." Maria took them, touched by the simple kindness. "Thank you." "We take care of each other," the attendant said. "That's what matters." She moved on, and Maria was left with those words echoing in her mind. We take care of each other. It was such a simple idea, yet it had been absent from the airport, from the regulations, from the system that had nearly swallowed her whole. But then Officer Thorne had remembered it. He'd chosen to see her, to listen, to act with compassion instead of just compliance. And now she was here, 30,000 feet above the earth, hurtling toward her mother, because one person had decided that rules were meant to serve people, not the other way around. Maria made a decision in that moment. If she survived this, if she made it to her mother's bedside and held her hand and said goodbye, she would carry this lesson forward. She would remember what it felt like to be seen, and she would make sure others felt seen too. The plane began its descent into Atlanta at 11:23 p.m. The city lights sprawled below like a galaxy, vast and indifferent. Maria pressed her forehead against the cool window and whispered a prayer, not for herself, but for Officer Thorne, for Supervisor Chen, for everyone who'd ever stood at a crossroads between policy and humanity. And she prayed she wouldn't be too late. The wheels touched down at 11:37 p.m. Maria was out of her seat before the seatbelt sign turned off, earning a gentle rebuke from the flight attendant. She forced herself to wait, every second an eternity, as the plane taxied to the gate. Her phone came alive with notifications the moment she switched off airplane mode. 3 missed calls from Rachel. 1 text, she's still here, hurry. Maria's hands shook as she grabbed her bag from the overhead compartment. The moment the cabin door opened, she was moving, pushing past slower passengers with breathless apologies, her sneakers slapping against the jetway floor. Gate B7. She needed ground transportation. She needed. Ma'am, wait. Maria turned. A young man in an airline uniform was jogging toward her, slightly out of breath. Maria Jenkins. Yes, that's me, but I have to. I know, I'm David, Ground Services Coordinator. Officer Thorne from Dallas called ahead. We have a car waiting for you outside baggage claim. The driver knows where you're going. Maria blinked. What? No charge, it's arranged. Come on, I'll show you the fastest route. She followed him through the terminal in a daze, too stunned to fully process what was happening. Officer Thorne had called ahead. He'd arranged transportation. They emerged into the humid Atlanta night. A black sedan idled at the curb, and the driver, an older black man with silver hair, stepped out immediately. Mrs. Jenkins, I'm Harold, get in, sweetheart. We'll have you there in 20 minutes. Maria climbed into the back seat, and Harold pulled away from the curb before she'd even fastened her seatbelt. David waved from the sidewalk, and then they were speeding into the night, the city lights blurring past. Officer up in Dallas explained the situation, Harold said, his voice calm and steady. Said you needed to get to Sunrise Hospice fast as possible. Don't you worry, I know every shortcut in this city. Thank you, Maria whispered. I don't know how to repay. Ain't about repayment, it's about doing right. He met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Besides, that officer already took care of the fare, said you just focus on your mama. Maria's throat tightened. Officer Thorne, the man who'd nearly kept her from this moment, was now the reason she might make it in time. The streets of Atlanta rushed past. Harold navigated with practiced ease, weaving through late-night traffic, taking side streets and back routes. Maria watched the city transform from airport industrial to downtown high-rises to quieter residential neighborhoods. Every red light felt like an hour, every delay an eternity. Almost there, Harold said at 12:04 a.m. 5 more minutes. Maria's phone rang. Rachel. Hello. Maria, honey, where are you? 5 minutes away. How is she? A pause. She's been waiting for you. She's tired, baby, real tired, but she's holding on. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her I'm almost there. I will. Front entrance, okay? I'll be watching for you. The call ended. Maria pressed her forehead against the window, her breath fogging the glass. Hold on, Mama. Please hold on. Harold pulled up to the hospice at 12:08 a.m. The building was small, well-lit, peaceful. Maria was out of the car before it fully stopped. Go, Harold said. Go be with your mother. She ran. The automatic doors slid open. Rachel was there in the lobby, still in her scrubs, her face drawn with exhaustion and compassion. She pointed down a hallway. Room 14. She's been asking for you. Maria ran down the corridor, her footsteps echoing off the walls. Room 12, room 13, room 14. She pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by a small bedside lamp. Medical equipment beeped softly. And there, in the bed, impossibly small beneath white sheets, was her mother. Mama. Her mother's eyes opened. They were clouded with pain and medication, but they focused on Maria's face, and something like a smile touched her lips. Baby, she whispered, you came. Maria crossed the room in 3 steps and sank into the chair beside the bed. She took her mother's hand, so fragile now, paper-thin skin over delicate bones, and pressed it to her cheek. "I'm here, Mama, I'm right here." Her mother's fingers twitched the smallest squeeze. Thought I'd miss you." "Never, I'll never miss you, Mama." They sat in silence for a moment, mother and daughter, the weight of a lifetime between them. Then her mother spoke again, her voice barely audible. Tell me about your day." Maria almost laughed through her tears. Even now dying, her mother wanted to hear about her daughter's life. It was so perfectly, heartbreakingly her. So Maria told her. She told her about the airport, about Officer Thorne, about the moment she'd refused to sign the paper. She told her about the kindness of strangers, Chen, David, Harold, and how they'd all come together to get her here. Her mother listened, her eyes never leaving Maria's face. When the story was done, she smiled again, a little stronger this time. "That's my girl," she whispered. Knew you were strong. I learned from you, Mama." "No, baby, it was always yours." Her breathing was labored now, each word an effort. "You just needed to remember." Maria felt her mother's grip weakening. "Mama, don't go, not yet." "Have to, sweetheart, too tired." "Please." Her mother's eyes met hers, and in them, Maria saw everything they'd never said, all the love and pride and forgiveness that had always been there, waiting. "Love you," her mother breathed, "so much." "I love you too, Mama, so much." Her mother's eyes closed, her breathing slowed, and Maria held her hand and sang softly, an old hymn her mother used to sing when Maria was small, when the world felt too big and frightening. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. At 12:47 a.m., surrounded by love and song, her mother took her last breath. And Maria sat with her in the quiet, feeling the weight of loss and gratitude all at once, knowing that she'd made it, that her mother hadn't died alone, that in the end, love had been stronger than systems and rules and distance. Maria stayed with her mother's body for an hour. Rachel checked in periodically, bringing water and tissues, offering quiet comfort. Eventually, other staff came, respectful, gentle, efficient. There were forms to sign, decisions to make, arrangements to consider. Maria moved through it all in a fog, feeling both present and distant, her grief too large to fully inhabit yet. At 2:15 a.m., she found herself in the hospice parking lot, her bag at her feet, her phone in her hand. She had no hotel reservation, no plan. The reality of the next days, funeral arrangements, family notifications, the impossible task of going on, loomed ahead of her like a dark ocean. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is Officer Derek Thorne from Dallas. I hope this message finds you well. Harold let me know you arrived safely. I wanted to check in and see if there's anything else I can do to help during this difficult time." Maria stared at the message, tears blurring the words. This man, this stranger who'd almost destroyed her night and then saved it, was still thinking about her, still trying to help. She typed back with trembling fingers, "I made it in time. She passed an hour ago. Thank you for everything you did. You gave me the greatest gift I could have asked for." The response came quickly, "I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm grateful you made it. You taught me something important tonight." Maria wiped her eyes and called the number. It rang twice. "Mrs. Jenkins." Officer Thorne's voice was quiet, uncertain. "Why did you do it?" Maria asked. "Why did you risk your job for me?" A long pause, then, "Because you reminded me why I took this job in the first place. I became a TSA officer because I wanted to protect people, to keep them safe. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that safety isn't just about following rules. It's about seeing people, really seeing them. You could have let me sign that paper. It would have been easier." "Easier for who? Not for you, not for your sons, and not for me either. I've spent 3 years hating myself for missing my father's death, Tonight I realized I'd been punishing other people for my own guilt. His voice cracked slightly. You stood there and refused to let me do that to you. You had the courage to say no, even when it might have cost you everything. That kind of strength, it changes you. Maria sat down on a bench in the parking lot. The night air was thick and warm, cicadas singing in the nearby trees. I almost signed it, you know. I almost gave in. But you didn't, that matters. My mother used to say that sometimes the most important thing we can do is stand firm, even when we're scared. I never understood what she meant until tonight. She sounds like a wise woman. She was, Maria's voice broke. She really was. They sat in silence for a moment, connected across miles by a shared understanding of loss and redemption. Officer Thorne, Maria said finally, what happened after I left, with your supervisor? He exhaled. Chen put a formal note in my file, called it excessive use of discretionary authority. But she also told me privately that she'd have done the same thing. She lost her sister 2 years ago, wasn't there when it happened. She understood. Will you get in trouble? Probably, maybe, I don't know, he paused. But it doesn't matter. Some things are worth more than a clean record. You taught me that. Maria felt fresh tears coming. I don't know how to thank you. You already did. You reminded me that the rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. That's a lesson I won't forget. Another pause. Mrs. Jenkins, where are you staying tonight? Do you have somewhere to go? I haven't figured that out yet. Harold's still there, isn't he? He was going to wait. Maria looked up. Sure enough, the black sedan was still parked at the curb, Harold standing beside it, giving her space but watching over her. He is, she said, surprised. Good, I called a hotel near the hospice, the Comfort Inn on Peachtree. You have a room there for the next 3 nights prepaid. It's not much, but it's clean and quiet. Harold will take you. Officer Thorne, I can't let you. It's done. And it's not charity, Mrs. Jenkins, it's reparation. For every person I've stopped and never saw. For every time I enforced a rule without thinking about who it hurt. For my father, who I never got to say goodbye to. His voice softened. Let me do this, please. Maria couldn't speak. The generosity, the unexpected grace of it overwhelmed her. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Jenkins. And when you get back to Fort Worth, when you hug your sons, tell them that kindness matters. Tell them that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to accept injustice, even when it's wrapped up in official language. I will. And Mrs. Jenkins, your mother was right. You are strong. Don't ever forget that. The call ended. Maria sat on the bench, phone in hand, feeling the weight of the night settle around her. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear, the anger, the desperation. And she thought about the unexpected turns, the moments of grace that had appeared when she needed them most. Harold approached slowly. Ready, Miss Maria? She stood, shouldering her bag. Yes, thank you for waiting. Wasn't going nowhere, not till I knew you were okay. He opened the car door for her. You got people here, family. Just me. My boys are back in Texas. Then you got me. And Rachel said to tell you she'll check in tomorrow, see if you need anything. He smiled gently. This city takes care of its own, even the ones just passing through. Maria climbed into the car, and as Harold drove through the quiet streets toward the hotel, she felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there. It would be there for a long time. But alongside it was something else. Gratitude, hope, a renewed faith in the possibility of human kindness. She thought about Officer Thorne, alone in Dallas, probably lying awake, thinking about his father. She thought about Chen, carrying the weight of her sister's death. She thought about Rachel and Harold and David, all of them strangers who'd chosen to help for no reason except that it was right. And she thought about her mother's last words. You just needed to remember. Remember what? That she was strong, that she mattered, That even in a system designed to grind her down, she had the power to stand firm and demand to be seen as human. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her oldest son, Marcus. "Mom, you okay? Did you make it?" She typed back, "Made it, baby. Grandma's at peace now. I'll be home in a few days. I love you both so much." His response came immediately. "Love you too, Mom. You're the strongest person I know." Maria smiled through her tears. Her mother had raised her to be strong, and now she was raising her sons the same way. The legacy continued. At the hotel, Harold insisted on walking her to her room, carrying her bag despite her protests. At the door, he handed her a card. "That's my number. You need anything, and I mean anything. While you're here, you call me, day or night." "Harold, I don't know how to repay all this kindness." He smiled. "You already did, honey. You made it to your mama. That's all that matters." He tipped an imaginary hat. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow's gonna be hard." Maria entered the room, simple but clean, exactly as Officer Thorne had described. She set her bag down and collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted to even change clothes. Her last thought before sleep took her was of her mother's face, peaceful at the end, and Officer Thorne's voice. "Some things are worth more than a clean record." She understood now. Some things were worth more than money, more than rules, more than the small tyrannies of everyday life. Love was worth more. Dignity was worth more. The courage to stand up and say no to injustice was worth more. And as Maria drifted into sleep, she carried those truths with her like a prayer, a promise, a legacy passed from mother to daughter and onward into the world. 3 days later, Maria stood at her mother's graveside under a gray Atlanta sky. The funeral had been small, just a few of her mother's church friends, Rachel from the hospice, and Harold, who'd insisted on attending. Her boys had flown in the night before, using money scraped together from Maria's small community back home. The preacher spoke about eternal rest and faith and the promise of reunion. Maria heard the words distantly, her mind elsewhere. She was thinking about the journey that had brought her here and all the unexpected angels who'd appeared along the way. After the service, as the small gathering dispersed, Rachel approached. "Your mother talked about you all the time," she said. "She was so proud. She said you had a spine of steel covered in velvet." Maria smiled through her tears. "That sounds like her." She also said something else the day before she died. She said, "My Maria is going to change the world, she just doesn't know it yet." Rachel squeezed her hand. "I think she was right." That evening, back at the hotel, Maria sat with her sons. Marcus, 15, tall and quiet like his father, and Jamal, 13, still young enough to cry openly about his grandmother's death. They ordered pizza and watched television and held each other in the way families do when words aren't enough. "Mom," Marcus said eventually, "what happened at the airport? You never really told us." So Maria told them the whole story. About Officer Thorne and the $7,000 fine. About the moment she'd refused to sign. About how everything had changed because she'd chosen dignity over desperation. "You said no." Jamal's eyes were wide. "Even though you might have missed Grandma." "I did." "Weren't you scared?" "Terrified. But Grandma used to say that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you are." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "That officer who helped you, is he the same one who tried to fine you?" "Yes." "Why did he change his mind?" Maria considered the question. "Because I reminded him of something he'd forgotten. That rules are supposed to protect people, not hurt them. And sometimes it takes someone standing up and saying, 'This is wrong,' to wake us up to our own behavior." "So you changed his mind by refusing?" "No, baby. I didn't change his mind. I just gave him permission to see what was already there. His own humanity, his own regret, his own chance to do better." That night, after her sons were asleep, Maria sat alone in the hotel room and wrote. She'd never been much of a writer, but the words came easily now, pouring out of her onto the page of a cheap notepad. She wrote about the airport, about Officer Thorne, about the system that had tried to punish her for being poor. But she also wrote about grace, about unexpected kindness, about the power of standing firm in your own dignity. When she finished, she took a photo of what she'd written and posted it to social media, her small Facebook account with barely 200 friends. She titled it, "The Day I Said No to Injustice." She went to sleep not expecting much. She woke to her phone exploding with notifications. Her post had been shared, and shared again, and again. Within 24 hours it had been seen by thousands, then tens of thousands. News outlets picked it up. A local TV station in Dallas contacted her for an interview. People from across the country reached out with their own stories of airport injustice, of impossible fines, of being made to feel small by systems designed to process, not protect. And then she got a call from Officer Derek Thorne. "Mrs. Jenkins, I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, how are you?" I'm not sure, honestly. Your post has caused quite a stir. TSA headquarters called this morning. They want to review our protocols for civil penalties. They're talking about policy changes." Maria sat up straighter. "Policy changes?" "Because of you, because you spoke up. They can't ignore it now that thousands of people are sharing similar stories." He paused. "You did what I couldn't, you made them listen." "We did it together," Maria said. "You gave me the chance to tell the story. And now people are listening. Real change might actually happen." Over the following weeks, as Maria returned to Fort Worth and tried to resume her normal life, the story continued to grow. A national news magazine featured her. A civil rights organization invited her to speak about economic justice and airport security. The TSA announced a comprehensive review of their civil penalty protocols, with a particular focus on how they impacted low-income travelers. Officer Thorne was reassigned, not as punishment, but to a new position helping develop training programs focused on compassionate enforcement. He called Maria to tell her, his voice thick with emotion. "They want me to train new officers," he said, "to teach them what you taught me, that every person we stop has a story, that dignity matters more than dollars." "You'll be good at that," Maria said. "You learned the hard way. That makes you the perfect teacher." "I'm also paying forward what I learned. Half my paycheck, every month, goes to an emergency travel fund I'm setting up. For people like you, people who need to get somewhere important but can't afford the barriers we put in their way." Maria felt tears sting her eyes. "Derek," it was the first time she'd used his first name. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. I have to live with what I almost did to you. This is how I make it right." 6 months later, Maria received an invitation to Washington, D.C. The TSA was announcing new guidelines for civil penalties, with provisions for economic hardship and compassionate exceptions. They wanted her there for the press conference. She stood on a stage in a government building, her sons beside her, and watched as officials announced reforms that would protect thousands of travelers from the injustice she'd faced. Officer Thorne was there too, in his new role as Director of Training and Officer Wellness. Afterward, they stood together in the lobby, two people whose lives had intersected in the worst possible way and emerged transformed. "Your mother would be proud," Thorne said. "She would be proud of both of us," Maria replied. "She always said that mistakes are only failures if we don't learn from them. You learned. You changed. That takes courage too." He smiled. "So what's next for you?" Maria thought about it. She was still a housekeeper, still living paycheck to paycheck. But she was also something else now, a voice, an advocate, a woman who'd proven that standing firm in your dignity could change the world. "I'm going to keep telling the story," she said. "To my sons, to anyone who'll listen, because people need to know that they have power even when the system says they don't, especially then." That night back in her small apartment in Fort Worth, Maria tucked her sons into bed, too old for tucking in, really, but they indulged her. She sat on the edge of Marcus's bed and looked at both of them. "Grandma taught me something important," she said. "She taught me that kindness is stronger than anger, that forgiveness heals more than punishment, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to accept injustice, even when everyone tells us we have no choice." "Is that what you did at the airport?" Jamal asked. "That's what I tried to do, and it worked, not because I was special but because I remembered my worth. And when Officer Thorne saw that, really saw it, he remembered his own humanity too." "So good things can come from bad situations?" Marcus asked. "Sometimes, if we're brave enough to stand in our truth and give others the chance to stand in theirs." She kissed them both good night and walked to her own small room. On her dresser sat a photograph of her mother, young and smiling, full of the strength she'd passed down to her daughter. Maria picked up the photo and traced her mother's face. "I remembered, Mama," she whispered. "I remembered I was strong, and I'm teaching your grandsons the same thing." She set the photo down and looked out the window at the Fort Worth night. Somewhere in this city, in this country, in this world, there were people facing impossible choices. People being crushed by systems that valued procedures over people. People who'd forgotten their own worth. And somewhere, there were also people like Officer Thorne. People who'd lost their way but might find it again if someone reminded them of their own humanity. Maria made a promise to herself and to her mother's memory. She would be that reminder. For as long as she had breath and voice, she would tell the story. She would speak up. She would refuse to be made small. Because in the end, that was the lesson. Not that the world was fair, it often wasn't. Not that systems would protect the vulnerable, they often didn't. But that even in the face of injustice, we had the power to choose dignity, to choose grace, to choose the hard, brave work of staying human. And sometimes, if we were lucky, our humanity would wake up someone else's. Sometimes, kindness really was stronger than anger. Sometimes, forgiveness really did heal more than punishment. Sometimes, one woman's refusal to be broken could ripple outward and change the world. Maria turned off the light and climbed into bed, her heart full of grief and gratitude in equal measure. Tomorrow, she would go back to work. She would clean hotel rooms and count pennies and raise her sons with the same strength her mother had given her. But she would do it knowing that she mattered, that her story mattered, that her courage had made a difference. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.